And welcome, friends. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of the Freedom Mastery podcast. I am hyper excited to open up this new episode of the new season. This is the first time I'm opening a new season. It's a second season. For that reason, I am super excited because I also want to deliver you something very, very special. And this is purely based on the questions and issues I was seeing and observing in the property market fairly recently. People ask those questions. People sometimes don't ask those questions, but they just don't know where they're going with the property investing strategy. Big problem that I notice is that very often people go into property investing, but because it's such a big subject, people are very overwhelmed. They make bad decisions, they choose the wrong strategies for them, and as a result, they don't see great results on their property journey. Months go past and they still don't see the results. So today, hopefully after this episode, once you listen to it, you'll get a complete and utter clarity on the strategy that you should be doing depending on your circumstances. So I hope you're excited, fasten your seatbelts. I cannot wait to deliver this podcast to you. So whether you don't have a clue about property investing and you're thinking about property investing, that's great because you'll get a lot more clarity. But perhaps you're in a position that you've already started doing things, but for some reason you just don't see the results. This is also ideal for you. And even if you are achieving certain level of success in property, then that's great because today I'm going to be crunching 6 property investing strategies that in my opinion are the most popular right now, and a lot of people are going to make a lot of money into those strategies. So without further ado, let me get straight into the show. All of those 6 property investing strategies I'm going to be evaluating based on certain criteria, and that criteria is financial commitment, time commitment, difficulty, and longevity. So how quickly do you want to see the results in a specific strategy? We all know some people want to see the results very, very fast. Some people are very, very patient. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong in this respect. So we're going to be touch basing on strategies that fit everybody separately. Property investing number 1 is deal sourcing. What is deal sourcing in the first place? Deal sourcing is a strategy where you find and package deals for investors. So you don't do anything with them, you don't invest money into those properties, you just package them, you find great deals and push them into the investor, and then you charge investor the money for the deal. Whether that's going to be a great rent deal or whether that's going to be a buy-to-let deal. If the deal makes sense, the investor will be happy to pay you the sourcing fee in order to buy that deal off you. So let's evaluate that in the first place. So what's the financial commitment when it comes to deal sourcing? Well, everything, by the way, here will be based on my experience and on my information. So disclaimer, this is just purely based on my experience, information that I have, and that hopefully will be helping you to make an informed decision about your property journey. So in terms of the financial commitment, deal sourcing requires around £1,500 to begin with, because all it takes is literally just the compliance for deal sourcing company. Okay, there are some different things that you have to purchase in order to be a compliant deal sourcing company, or if you don't want to buy the compliance, you can start with no money at all, and you can start with co-sourcing. So finding other sourcers who have access to investors, you'll then pass them the deals that you find, and they'll sell that to their investors, and you'll split the profit. That's how simple it works in theory. In terms of the time commitment, this requires a lot of time investment from you. It's a very active strategy. Essentially, you have to continuously be in touch with the letting agents, with landlords, with investors, with other deal sourcers. So this, if you want to marry up a lot of different parties into the deal in order to make it all work, you have to be very, very active and very, very available as well. In terms of the complexity or difficulty of the strategy, I evaluate that as moderate. It's not the easiest strategy, it's not the hardest as well, but definitely it requires some training and some coaching and information in order to do it legally from obviously legal aspects, you have to have the right compliance, but also you have to have certain steps in place in order to run the business ethically right and everything. So it's organized and you can move forward with the deal, sell it quickly because nobody will be waiting for you, right? First comes, first served. So at the end of it, you can also expect very quick results. If done rightly, deal sourcing is something that you can start today, this week, and then you can start finding those deals and selling them within the next couple of weeks. I've seen people making a lot of money in deal sourcing, but it also requires you to have an established network, especially of investors, letting agents, and landlords. Let me move on to the next strategy, which is a rent to rent. As you all know, I'm a big fan. I'm doing rent to rent. I'm coaching and mentoring people in rent to rent. So here are my numbers. This is my evaluation about this property investing strategy. In the first place, in terms of the financial commitment, in my opinion, everybody who's got between 2K and 10K can start a rent to rent. Of course, more money you have, the better. Hey there, I'm getting inquiries from people asking for help with their rent-to-rent business in order to start or grow it to 6 figures in profit. The best way to get hold of me is to text me on 075 22 571 026. That's 075 22 571 026. I will get back to you as soon as I can and I'll help you with whatever you need. Now let's get back to the video. Because you can then secure more deals with more money, of course, and you can scale up your business much faster. However, if you've got 2K, 3K, not a big deal. You can still start doing rent to rent successfully. You just have to be smart about your blueprint, about your strategy, and how you're going to be finding deals and what deals will suit your specific business. So in terms of the time, it requires moderate time. It's definitely less active than deal sourcing. And in my opinion, you need, especially at the beginning, between 10 and 15 hours of your time per week in order to successfully start and scale that business relatively quickly. In terms of the difficulty, similar to deal sourcing, this also requires a moderate level of training. I would say a little bit more than moderate, okay? Because there is a little bit more involved rather than just securing a deal, because then you have to manage the deal. You have to squeeze out as much profit as possible. So there are some certain skills that are not required when you're a deal sourcer. And in terms of the results, you should expect quick results. You should be having your first deal within 1 to 3 months if you know what you're doing. Of course, there are people who are like struggling for months and months and still cannot secure a deal, of course. But there are people at the same time who can secure deals in weeks instead of months. So on average, 1 to 3 months is definitely enough for you to secure your first rent-to-rent deal. I want to add a comment on this particular strategy because it's definitely more passive than deal sourcing. It's definitely less active. On the flip side, you have to be prepared to put in 5 to 10 hours a week in order to manage. It's not completely passive, although we can run that business from any other part of the world. I'm a prime example of doing that, and I know many of my colleague renters who are also doing the same thing. They don't mind going on a holiday and they can still manage and operate that business from abroad. Let me move forward to the next strategy, which is buy to let. We all know buy to let, of course. Many people just want to focus on buy to let because it's relatively passive. It does not require a lot of your effort, and I completely agree with you. There are, like every single strategy, some pros and cons associated to this strategy as well. So let me quickly go through them right now. In the first place, in order to begin, financial commitment, right? In my opinion, in the UK, you need minimum £25,000 because, of course, you need a deposit money. Of course, you need some money for the solicitors. You will need some money for the stamp duties and maybe for a slight refurb at the very beginning. So 25K is actually a very low amount. It's only for a property that would cost you probably 60 or 70K somewhere up north, plus the fees, plus the costs, maybe for a slight refurb. So 25K, in my opinion, is an absolute minimum in order to buy a buy-to-let property in the UK. In regards to the time commitment, of course, that strategy does not require a lot of time commitment. When you are starting, you're going to be looking for those deals. So you're going to be making phone calls, arranging viewings, etc. I would say maybe you need 1 hour a day, maybe 2 hours a day to begin with. Once you've got a deal, the management is relatively passive. If you've got a property in a good condition, then you won't require a lot of time. In all fairness, you'll just be dealing with an every odd maintenance issue raised by your tenant, or maybe them calling you about something, asking you for something, or arranging a gas certificate, for example. Involvement is very, very minimal with buy to let. In terms of the difficulty of the strategy, in my opinion, is the easiest strategy out of all 6 that I'm covering today. So if you're looking for the easiest, then buy to let is definitely a strategy for you. And in terms of the speed, I evaluated the speed of the results at moderate, because buy to let is definitely slower strategy comparing to rent or deal sourcing, where you can start seeing results, great results in weeks or maybe a couple of months. But with buy to let, it's going to take us at least a month or 2 months to get accepted on the deal. And then, of course, the conveyancing process on average will take 3 to 4 months. So before you start renting out, we're probably talking about 6 months minimum for you to start seeing profits from a buy to let property. Remember that buy to let is very repetitive income. It's less involvement from you. However, you're putting down the money that essentially is frozen into the deposit. Bear that in mind when you pick up the right strategy for you. Strategy number 4: buy, refurbish, refinance, or buy, refurbish, and sell, otherwise known as flip. That strategy is very, very popular because it ticks a lot of many different boxes on people's list in terms of what they want to do. Let me cover why. So in the first place, what's the financial commitment that's required from somebody in order to go into this strategy? And I'm completely bypassing the fact that you can raise money, because in all fairness, you can raise money for every single one of those strategies. But when it comes to BRR and other development strategies, of course, raising finance is even more popular. But let's say for the sake of doing this strategy, we assume that for all of those strategies, you're going to have your own money. So in my opinion, in order to go and start doing BRR, you need minimum £50,000 of your own capital. Of course, 50k is a very, very small amount if you want to just successfully do a project in BRR. In my opinion, it should be closer to 60 or 70k, but 50k is an absolute minimum. And if you've got 50k sitting in a bank account, you might be thinking about going into BRR. Okay. In terms of the time commitment, it's actually quite moderate time to find a deal and to manage it across the refurb process. Or if you're also involved in the refurb process itself, then the time commitment will be quite high. So bear that in mind. In terms of the difficulty, similar to rent, in my opinion, it's a moderate difficulty. Yes, you need to know how to find deals. Yes, you need to know how to find the builders. So you need to find the power team, similar to rent, of course. And then you need to know how to manage the project, which is slightly different skill to managing property, but it requires similar level of difficulty. In terms of how quickly you can expect results, results will be slower, much slower than rent or deal sourcing, for example. And let me tell you why. Because it will take you some time in order to even secure the first property, of course, to find it and secure it. Conveyancing process then takes minimum 3 to 4 months. And then on top of that, remember that you have to take into account the refurb process. So refurb can take what? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It depends whether you've got people doing the work for you, whether you're going to be managing the project, whether you're going to have a team of people, whether you're going to be doing that yourself. It all depends. But even if you had a team of people running your BRR project, you're going to have your builders, you're going to have your plumbers, electricians, etc., etc. This will typically take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And on top of that, you have to remember that after this, you have to either refinance the property or you have to sell it. So if you sell it, then it's going to be another time for you to get the property marketed, get the property sold. And of course, it's a long process. In my opinion, an average BRR should take about 12 months from the moment when we start to the moment when we actually get the money in the bank. So 12 months is relatively slow strategy, but at the same time, it's quite lucrative. If you found the right project with good potential capital gain, and then at the end of it you sell the property, there is a great profit of 20k, 30k, 40k. I know people making 70, 80, 90k from one BRR project as well. But on average, I see somewhere between 20 and 40,000 pounds is a good flip project. So that's what you should be aiming at as well. Moving on to the next strategy, which is lease option agreement. Very, very popular strategy, especially nowadays, where people don't have money to buy property, but they want to own the asset. Lease option is where you initially rent out the asset, you lease the asset from the owner with the agreement that after a certain period of time, you've got the right, but not obligation to buy the asset for the price that we agreed today. Great strategy, but also it's got its pros and cons like every single strategy. And on top of that, we have to remember that it's not for everybody. So let me go through our criteria in the first place. In terms of the money to begin with, it's very, very similar in many, many aspects to rent, because essentially lease option agreement is rent to rent with agreed purchase at the end of specific period that we can execute, but we don't have to. So in my opinion, it's a slightly more expensive strategy because we have to have a right contract in place that will accommodate the whole lease option, right? It shouldn't be a one contract capturing everything. In my opinion, every lease option agreement should be drafted specifically for specific deal. And for that, you also need a specific and good solicitor who's got good experience with lease option agreements. So in order to define the financial commitment, I would say we are somewhere between £3,000 and £10,000 in order to secure a good lease option agreement. In terms of the time, moderate time. Same thing like with rent to rent. This one obviously involves, the solicitor's process of signing the contract, so it can take a little bit longer. But the actual process of finding a deal, it shouldn't take you much longer to find a lease option agreement deal. In terms of the difficulty, because it involves additional step where we just have to introduce the conditions of the actual purchase within the agreement, the difficulty I would define somewhere between moderate and high, because we are introducing additional step. But remember that if you want to be in that position, you don't have to go straight into lease options. You can start with rent to rent and then introduce agreements and arrangements with landlords that eventually you will buy that asset. But initially, you start just with rent to rent, which is a little bit easier strategy, a little bit easier to start and begin, and lower entry level in terms of the funds and finances. That's how I would evaluate lease option agreements. And in terms of the results, you should expect the results fast/moderate, purely because it's a little bit harder to find a lease option agreement deal for somebody who's just starting in property, but it's a little bit easier to find a rent-to-rent deal. So perhaps think about how quickly you want to see the results in the first place. Because if you want to see them very, very fast, then my suggestion would be start with rent-to-rent and then upgrade your second or third or fourth deal that you get with an agreement with the landlord that perhaps he would be open to sell this deal or sell this property in the next 5 years for a great amount today. So as I said, it's similar to rent to rent. You've got the option to buy, but the contract is essential with this strategy. And that brings me to strategy number 6, which is the most advanced out of all 6, and that's property development. It's a huge strategy, and first disclaimer here, nobody should start with this strategy. You should have some skin in the game. You should have some experience with one or couple or 3 of those strategies, ideally beforehand, before you go into development. Unless you're a risk taker or you've got a great network around you. But let me touch base on what this specific strategy actually involves. So in terms of financial commitment, the commitment is very, very high, because we all know that in order to build properties, to build homes, development requires a lot of funds. And typically, people are not looking to invest just their own money, even if they've got a lot of money. typically for developments, we're looking to raise money of people who are very, very cash rich and who are willing to invest into development projects, ideally with somebody who's got experience, particularly in development per se. In terms of the results, you cannot expect fast results in this strategy. Absolutely, it's the slowest strategy. It takes years from the project to start in order to carry this all the way through, depending on how many properties you build as well. Because there could be a development of just 1 or 2 properties, but there could be a development of tens of hundreds of properties in one big estate. So of course, then it becomes a longer and longer project. But at the same time, this is definitely the most rewarding because this is where the biggest money is involved. This is where the biggest profit margins are involved. But this is where the biggest difficulty is also involved. So bear that in mind. This property development is like a cherry at the top of the cake. If you want to get there, then get some skin in the game. There are strategies with much lower entry levels. And for that reason, take some smaller steps before you take big steps and you start really running within property development, and that's where you start making huge profits, huge money. So just to summarize, guys, there are many strategies, of course, and for everybody, depending on their level of time or money that they have right now. So think about what strategy is good for you. Do you have plenty of time but no money? Do you have more money but less time? Are you currently working and you have to think about sustaining and keeping the current activities that you have, and you just want to add additional side hustle to your activities? Regardless of where you are right now, there is definitely a strategy, and you can pick at least one of those strategies to suit and match your lifestyle right now. But you're looking for this additional income, or you're looking for this additional time that you want to get back in your life, then definitely pick the right strategy for you. And trust me, if you do it right and you educate yourself in that strategy, there is nothing holding you back. Remember as well, my one tip I want to give you today is that you don't have to start from, let's say, deal sourcing, because this is the lowest entry, and then you gradually have to upgrade to rent, then maybe to lease options, and maybe to BRR, and then development. Look, when I started investing in property, I started with buy-to-let. And then from buy-to-let, I went into rent-to-rent. So the order is not actually that important. I want to clarify with you that you have to find a strategy just to keep you going, just to start. And it doesn't mean that that one strategy will be your choice forever. Ideally, yes, if you, let's say, start doing deal sourcing, then you can do deal sourcing, and then you can eventually, once you master deal sourcing, go into another strategy that will fit your circumstances when you've got more skin in the game. Maybe property development, maybe BRRs, maybe rent to rent. But because I gave you this specific order, it does not mean that you have to go in this specific order like it was like a property journey ladder kind of thing. No, just pick a strategy that's right for you, and then once you master this strategy well, you can then choose another strategy, implement that into your overall strategy, and then move forward and move forward. So remember, pick a strategy that's right for you. Focus on it right now. Do not get distracted by other strategies. Just make sure that you hit the results that you want to see within the strategy. And then when you are where you want to be, introduce another strategy to your business. And one final recommendation, of course, I'm not pushing you to do anything. I'm not asking you to do anything. This is just completely my recommendation to you based on my experience. Every single time when I made a progress into my property journey, or just not property itself, but many different ventures in my life, the biggest progress I made was when I invested money into the right coaching, the right mentoring, the right education. So if you want to be good at lease options, for example, then get yourself a good lease option agreement coach. If you want to be great at rent to rent, then get yourself a good coach who's managing rent to rent very, very well. But if you try to do it yourself, the process will be slower, more painful, and more risky. If you want to avoid all of those, then absolutely get yourself in the right network around the right people who already have done what you want to do. And trust me, this will cut down a lot of time, a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration, and financial loss as well. With this in mind, I'm very happy I managed to open season 2 of the Freedom Mastery podcast. I cannot wait to take you through another whole episode, to another whole season. I already have some great guests lined up for this season, so I hope you're going to stay tuned. Look at my social media, follow me on my Facebook, on my Instagram, on my TikTok, on my YouTube. I cannot wait to share more with you as we go through the years. And without further ado, guys, implement, take this into account. I cannot wait to see those results in your property journey happening for you starting from today. Until next time, signing out. Peace and love.